Lemkin Solitaire and Equalizer seeders and planters offer disruptive innovation like vertical banding, dry and or liquid onboard fertilizer, and great prices. Go to lemkindemo.com for more information and to request a demo.
We're going to talk politics now. Lots happening in the world of agriculture. And Canada has a new Minister of Agriculture and Agri-Food, no stranger to Real Agriculture and RealAg Radio. It is Mr. Kody Blois. Minister Blois, it is great to chat with you.
Shaun, it's always a privilege to jump on the show. You do a great job highlighting the issues. And like you said, I'm no stranger, but to your listeners out there, really pleased to talk about the portfolio, a lot going on in the world and what we're trying to get done.
Yeah, so we're going to get into some of those issues. But first, I want you to kind of reintroduce yourself to the audience. Give us some of your background. Just,
Sure.
who is Kody Blois?
Look, I proudly serve the constituency of Kings Hants in rural Nova Scotia in the Annapolis Valley in Hants County. Dad drove a truck. Mom's an administrative assistant. I don't come from a political family per se, but I jumped into this. I'm a former athlete, draft pick of the Halifax Mooseheads. So for most of your listeners, OHL or WHL equivalent in the maritime provinces. So, I'm a sport guy at heart, big country music fan. And look, I got into politics because I wanted to give back to my community. And so I had started a couple different not-for-profits. I have a Master of Management and Public Administration. I was practicing law before my predecessor, Scott Bryson. Some may remember his name. Yep. He decided to step down in 2019 from Prime Minister Trudeau's cabinet, and the seat opened, and I've had the privilege of serving for the last 6 years as the MP. Now, for those listeners that may not know Nova Scotia agriculture well, Kings Hants is the most important agricultural hub, I'll say, certainly Nova Scotia, but I would say Atlantic Canada as well. Smaller in comparison to some of the big provinces out west and Ontario, but we're important in a regional context. And so I have a lot of touch points. I have a lot of farmers in my riding. They have been very good to educate me, to engage with me about their needs over the last 6 years. And on the parliamentary side, I was the chair of the House of Commons Standing Committee since 21. So, that's a great way to get a sense of the national stakeholders, the national issues. And then I had the privilege of serving as the parliamentary secretary for just a short period before Mr. Carney put my name up for cabinet.
So what did you try to accomplish over the weekend? I saw a bunch of social media posts. You were making some calls and doing some things. What were the key priorities over the weekend? You became minister on Friday, so working fast.
Look, we had a full, very productive day on Friday, Saturday. I let my team have a little bit of downtime on Sunday morning, but I know I have a short window here. There's a lot of uncertainty around what could be an election coming down the line. And the Prime Minister has been very clear. We can't control the external events on, the geopolitics of the world. We're dealing with a U.S. administration that is far more hostile in the trading relationship than, perhaps ever, or certainly recently. I know the impacts are very real on producers because of Chinese tariffs, and we can talk about that. But this is a difficult time. So we have to control what we can control in this country. My message to my deputy minister on day one, I want a list of things on Monday morning on my desk that are non-cost in nature, that are things that industry has been raising, that we ought to be able to get done with the proper focus and the drive that is necessary and the culture that I'm looking to establish here. My deputy minister has been great, and the civil servants and I've got a great ministerial team. We are focused on what we can get out the door in the time that we have remaining that are concrete measures to support farmers. And some of this is red tape. Look, your audience. Big programs are important. We can talk about tariff support and kind of what we're trying to do within that bailiwick. But sometimes farmers just go, get the hell out of my way. Get the red tape out of the way. Let's find ways to be more efficient. Let's find ways for the regulatory cooperation to happen quicker. And that is the message I'm signaling. I'm very close to having some things that I think the sector will really like and support. You might have to have me back on the show on Friday. We'll see what we were able to get through. But, we're getting some things done quickly that I think the sector is going to really appreciate. And of course, we're dealing with the situation of the uncertainty where I know there's a lot of stress out there in the agriculture community because of the uncertainty.
Yeah, a lot of talk about interprovincial trade barriers being this low-hanging fruit for Canada, but that's easier said than done. Like, for example, what I keep on hearing is one of the hangups on interprovincial trade barriers being dropped is something like supply management, creating an issue and preventing that. So what are some areas that we can really tackle when it comes to reducing some of those trade barriers internally?
Well, some of this, look, a lot of this is being driven by the provinces. I'm the federal minister of agriculture, and so we have a role to help convene provinces and territories to focus on those efforts. I had a conversation, for example, with Minister Morrow from my home province of Nova Scotia yesterday. He was asking about beet inspection. Those are conversations that we can look at. We got to be careful, though, because not all provinces are actually aligned in terms of what their standards are. And so we don't want to compromise the strong integrity that we have. But my job will be to, I've had conversations with nearly all of my FPT ministers so far to make sure we have an open line of communication. Minister Freeland is now responsible for that file on internal trade. I know it'll be a focus of hers. And depending on the commodity group, Shaun, some that the interprovincial play that are much more external and export focused, this is not nearly as much of a concern. I've got a wine and grape industry down in Nova Scotia, it'd be the same in BC and Niagara. Christ, it'd be a lot nicer if we could get those Nova Scotia wines to Ontario and those good Ontario wines to Nova Scotia. Those are some things that I think we can do, but it's creating a culture. My job, Shaun, as the minister, is to come in. We have 30,000 people at Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada in our requisite agencies. They do tremendous work. I'm proud of them. We sent out a message today from the minister, or I guess it was maybe yesterday, and I just wanted to give, and we'll make sure we share it with you and your team, but it's about leading with saying, how do we be focused concretely on the economic outcomes, the reduction of red tape, getting things done? And we are going to really focus on that. You know that I've been a champion around registration of farm products and how we can do things. More to be said on that soon. I'm hoping there's going to be some things that your audience is really going to like. But we're pushing it. And I want to have a change agenda mandate in this department. When I sat down with Prime Minister Carney, one of the things that he said to me is he said, if we want to have the best growth in the G7 and we want to be the strongest economy, which has been his central message, he said agriculture has to be at the heart of that. With all due respect to our outgoing Prime Minister, I don't know if we ever heard that level of messaging. You're going to hear more from Prime Minister Carney about the way that we can use our natural resources, our agriculture sector, the endowments that we have as a country to drive economic success. And we have to. We're in a moment that it really matters. One
of our challenges, though, we cannot do that without trade. And we're having a hard time finding some dancing partners. We got challenges with the U.S., obviously. The issues now were ongoing issues, I would say, that have been ramped up with China. Prime Minister Carney was just in France on Sunday, meeting with Macron, and he was Macron was talking about, hey, we need trade, we need free trade agreements. Well, France hasn't even ratified the CETA agreement that was signed back in 2016. How do we make agriculture really the integral component of increasing Canada's productivity and GDP if we don't have really great trading relationships?
Well, look, you hit it on the head to a certain extent. I'll meet you in the middle somewhere there, Shaun. I mean, Canada is the only country in the G7 that has a trading relationship with all other G7 countries. It would be important for me to compliment Minister McCauley and his work. He spent a lot of time in the Indo-Pacific trying to build those markets, which are particularly important for Western producers. So we have access to markets. But again, the thing I have heard loud and clear in the 6 years that I've been a parliamentarian, one thing to have it on paper, a different thing to have it concretely. And so the conversations I had with the president of the CFIA yesterday were, how can we get into the nitty gritty of making sure that we actually are working very closely with the regulatory agencies in those areas to further drive cooperation? The markets are one thing. The businesses, the farmers, the exporters, they'll take care of that. It's about government and regulations and the regulatory authorities working closer, more harmonized, and getting out of the way so that we can make sure there's that trade back and forth. So those were concrete conversations. We had the Minister of Agriculture for Ireland here yesterday in Ottawa. Or I guess it was the Minister of State, but still works with Minister Hayden from Ireland. And again, it was something I raised on CETA. They haven't ratified it, but what I understand to be true is that the actual trading implication is aligned with CETA. It's more of a political formality at this point. But yes, these are the things that we have to do. Now, to your listeners, the Prime Minister has gone to Europe in the time that he has remaining potentially before a RIP period. Opposition parties are talking about taking us down. Maybe the Prime Minister will choose to go to the Governor General himself. We don't know that. But we have a short window. He chose to go to Europe. My message to your listeners, Shaun, is we also understand the importance of the Pacific. We understand the importance of the Indo-Pacific and partners there. I am acutely aware of the importance of the Chinese market to our exporters, particularly in Western Canada and our farm producers. And the first call I had when I was the minister, we were in the car, we went from Rideau Hall, we're over to our first cabinet meeting. My first call was to Minister Harrison in Saskatchewan for two reasons. One, they're dealing with major issues. Canola oil, canola meal, that's a big part of the Saskatchewan prairie economy. I get it. I wanted to have conversations right away about what we can do and make sure there was an open line of communication. The second piece, as the Minister of Agriculture, I have to be a federal champion for Western Canada. That is part of what I want to bring to the table. I'm a Nova Scotian. I'm a Maritimer, proud to be from the province. I'm the first Nova Scotian to ever be the Minister of Agriculture at the federal level, which is something I take great pride in. I'm also the youngest minister in the history of this country in this portfolio. But I want to make very clear to your audience, which I know is Western-based heavily, that I care about the industry, that I'm cognizant on the China dynamic and the United States. What I will say is I am feeding in information to Minister Joly and Minister LeBlanc. It's a very delicate situation. I don't want to come on this call and be disingenuous that, I have a crystal ball or that we can solve these things overnight. But those are dialogues that we're having because it is a very difficult situation where we have two major superpowers in the world that are in that frankly, the relationship is tense and we have tariffs in place. I know long-term that is not sustainable. We are going to have to find our pathway forward as a country. But part of my job is to recognize that I know that impact, that I'm cognizant of it, and I'm finding ways that we can contribute on the commodity considerations, whether or not they are more Europe-based, United States, or in the Pacific or with China. I'm aware of it, and I'm contributing even if you're not necessarily seeing it.
Yeah, right at the conclusion of the Biden administration, they rolled out a package passing approval of $9.7 billion in farm support payments because of some of the market losses in the back end of 2024 on that crop year. They're talking as well about a new market facilitation program here in 2025. Do you support this idea of providing financial assistance, ad hoc programming to producers impacted by the market, the market losses on things like canola, peas, pork?
Of course I do. There's a couple of considerations, though, that Shaun, that your audience needs to understand. Parliament is scheduled to come back on Monday. We just talked about the uncertainty about whether or not a federal election will come before that, or if the opposition parties bring us down, if Parliament were to go back and not actually support the speech from the throne. So we are living within the existing authorities of the Department of Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada. So we have our business risk management programs, which, by the way, I've had conversations with my deputy minister and my team to say, how do we make sure that we can stretch and do everything possible within those authorities to make sure that there is support for farmers in the short term? I had a conversation with Justine Hendricks yesterday from FCC. They do good work. They have set aside $1 billion of supports. Now, I know your listeners are going to say, look, Minister, loan capital is only so good. If we get in this long situation, we can't just keep racking up debt without having the ability to kind of balance the whole piece. I get that. So my message is I'm aware of that. The other piece is if we find ourselves into a very difficult situation in April, or this continues to escalate, and there is countervailing duties where the monies are being collected by the government, there will be an ability to distribute those back to a variety of different stakeholders. Obviously, as the Minister of Agriculture, I'll be having my elbows up at the cabinet table to make sure that that is going out, but we're not there yet, right? And we're living within our appropriations as a government right now. But yes, my commitment is that we would be doing things to make sure that we soften the blow. I'm looking at every tool available in my toolkit right now. I've had the conversation with the provinces and territories. We're hoping that, our deputy minister and our team, we can explore all flexibilities. Now, Shaun, it's important to recognize it's not just my purview. This is a provincial Fed-Prov cooperation. So if we try to move something on the federal side, we're going to need buy-in from the provinces and territories. So to be determined. I will try to do whatever I can and have something to show on this side. And again, my deputy minister has actually said we've already done some things on this side. As I get briefed up, that is an absolute priority point, because we want to do everything we can. Of course, I could talk about advanced payment program back up to the $250,000. I don't say that, as in it being a silver bullet, because by the way, the message that we have to send here, this is going to be difficult. We're not going to have the tools to be able to solve all issues, but I am going to be focused every single day, every minute, to make sure that we're doing everything we can, both on supports on the tariff-related impact and the geopolitical challenges, but also in-house. What can we do to get rid of things that are redundant regulations, that are old regulations, that are unnecessary bureaucratic stuff that is just a pain in the butt for our agriculture community? I am going to be deeply focused on that question. Again, I can't tell you quite what we're going to hopefully get across the line by the end of the week, but I think you'll like what you're seeing. And I think you'll like the messaging that you're going to be seeing from me in this new role, because we have to be sharply aggressive on this. The last piece I want to talk about, as it relates to this is, again, the focus on trade diversification. I was just on with Minister Lamontagne. Every region of the country has a different perspective on this as well. Like, you talk to a certain minister, you're talking to Harrison, look, we got to go feed the world. If you're in the Atlantic, it's a bit of a both. How do we build up local food security, and how do we make sure, our horticulture, our apples are going to the U.S.? We're highly reliant on the U.S., we've had conversations about what we can do elsewhere. Talk about PI potatoes, for example. How do we find different markets? But it's a mixture. Quebec, again, very focused on how they can build up that local food security within the province. I respect that. That's important. There's also an exporting aspect to this. So each province and region has a different view. My job as the federal minister is to work through that and try to make sure that we have concrete measures that each part of the country feels as though we're coming along with this together. But trade diversification, those two words are things that people want to hear in Western Canada. We're committed to it. Obviously, if we were to go in an election in the next couple of weeks, I will have a role on a platform as the minister responsible. I'll have an ability to have a pen on that. Those are going to be big focus areas for our party. Shaun, while we have the time, because I know you only have so much, always happy to come on here with your audience. I want to talk about carbon pricing, and I want to talk about clean fuel standards. So the first act that Prime Minister Carney did, first act of office, the cabinet, removed the consumer carbon price. This is good news for farmers. Now, in my job, and we didn't talk to your audience, but that I fought very hard against Prime Minister Trudeau to get changes to that policy, because I fundamentally felt it was not meeting the needs of rural Canada. Yes, we want to have environmental progress. God, any Canadian should, there's challenges out there. But right now on the depth list, it is economic security, it's defense, political and economic sovereignty. How do we, it is fifth or sixth at least on the depth list. But I think Canadians still want a government that's focused on it. I fully applaud that the Prime Minister took this measure. This will be relief, particularly on the natural gas and propane. Your listeners will know on-farm fuels for diesel and gas were already exempt for marked fuels on-farm, but natural gas and propane, the last government had missed that. It was too bad. I don't want to sound too partisan. It was too bad that the Conservatives filibustered their own damn bill on C-234, that we didn't get that through, but now we have that measure. In April, the checks that do go back to the agriculture community will continue, as will to the checks to small businesses, which is important, but the price signal is eliminated. That's really important. Poilievre now wants to get rid of the industrial price, and he wants to replace it with more government spending to reduce emissions. I'm going to be honest with your audience. I think it's a foolhardy idea, and here's why. The industrial carbon price is actually a tremendous opportunity for the agriculture sector. I had this conversation with Prime Minister Carney because he has been talking about, look, we're going to keep the industrial price, but we're going to widen the scope of how the large emitters can actually reduce their emissions and show that. So right now it's relatively limited. It's a trading system, Suncor between Irving, Algoma Steel between, what other large emitter. It doesn't allow it to go out. And so the Prime Minister has talked a lot about hybrid vehicles, EV vehicles, heat pumps, things that you can get credits for, that the companies could actually say, well, look, Shaun Haney bought a heat pump in his house. God, we're going to give him $100 for that because that's what the credit's worth. And that will actually reduce our emissions. Well, what a great opportunity for agriculture. And I've said to the Prime Minister, as part of his plan on the industrial price, which is still very crucial, we have to link it to the very good work that agriculture and farmers do every single day in this country. By Poilievre cutting that, we miss that opportunity to make that connection. But also the thing he's not talking about is economists will say the industrial price was doing the heavy lifting on the emission reduction. So how many billions and billions of taxpayer dollars is a Pierre Poilievre-led government going to have to invest to get to the same outcome that, frankly, a price on pollution or a price on carbon, which is inherently a small c conservative mechanism? That is conservative ideology at its core. So I don't know why Poilievre wants big government programs, and how much are we going to have to pay for that to have the hundreds of billions of dollars of new ITCs? Now, look, There has to be a mix, and our government did do some stuff on the ITC, but to put all your eggs in that basket is ludicrous because it's undermining the canola crush. It's undermining the ability for some of the biofuel sector, which is we have to focus on more. Last is on clean fuel standards. And you can have Barlow to come in and dispute this. This is fine. Like, I'm not trying to be too partisan. I want your audience to understand the mechanism, because I'm not ideological. I just want to be pragmatic about how we can actually do some good on the environment, but also create economic outcomes for our agriculture sector. Clean fuel standards. The Conservatives are proposing to cut that. Might sound good out in the streets in the suburbs, but I don't think it's good news for our canola farmers. It's not good news for our oil grain folks. The biofuel sector has tremendous potential in this country. Cutting the clean fuel standard actually reduces the demand side that we need in this country at a moment that, frankly, we're dealing with uncertainty in China. We're dealing with uncertainty in the United States. No, we should actually be wanting to do more on that. So where are our Conservative MPs in Western Canada? Why are they not telling Pierre Poilievre, this is shitty policy? I'm sorry for swearing, but this is not good. We should want to be creating that demand side. Anyways, I don't want to sound too partisan, like Shaun. I mean, this is a good, but like for me, beyond politics, this is the kind of stuff we got to be rooted on, and we got to get outcomes. That is my focus as a minister, is on outcomes, demonstrating that we're moving the needle and creating a culture that we're getting shit done here in Ottawa.
Do you see right now we've got that on the consumer carbon tax that's been moved to zero. That legislation is still in place. Is the Carney government intending to
absolutely? And again, I don't want to come across, but like I saw the Conservatives flailing on the weekend that we had a little Mark Carney sign off on the Prime Minister signing off on the paper. What has been done, because Parliament is not sitting and the government wanted to move as quickly as possible, it's an order in council to move the price signal to zero with an intention that a Carney-led government, if that happens, God willing, in my view, if it happens, that we will absolutely, our first act of Parliament will be to eliminate the legislation. But that was the tool that was available to the government in the time. I hope your audience appreciates the urgency that the government took on it. And I know it's a change agenda. Look, I know that the last Prime Minister was very hell-bent on keeping that price. Kudos to Mark Carney and the Prime Minister. Well, I get used to calling him the Prime Minister. Hopefully that'll be long-term. But yeah. Mark Carney, and under his leadership, that was his first act. And he's signaled it's good for farmers. It's good for our small business. And what we would replace the rebates in, by the way, Shaun, because the Conservatives never talked about the fact that the money did go back. Households did get those rebates. Lower and middle income households, actually, it was an important economic measure. The Prime Minister is proposing middle income tax cuts to offset that. So I think there's a very thoughtful approach here. And
but yeah, I got one more question, because I know we both got to go. Have you chatted with USDA Secretary Brooke Rollins yet?
We're making those connections. We're doing our outreach because we know it's extremely important. And in fact, some of the things that I've talked to my department is, can you give me a list of things that we can actually cooperate on? The Prime Minister, though, I do think this is important because, yes, that engagement will happen. But the relationship has been very strained. And frankly, it's been disrespectful. And Prime Minister Carney has made very clear, I'm willing to go to Washington. I'm willing to engage with the U.S. administration when there is an element of respect to how important that partnership is. And so we are making that outreach. Whether or not that's going to happen the next day or two, I'm not exactly sure. But of course, the Americans are a very crucial partner. I have a great relationship with G.T. Thompson, who's the House chair with the Republicans. I have great respect for John Bozeman, who is the senator from Arkansas, who is the Republican chair in agriculture. Two great gentlemen. And we've made outreach with those departments. But again, I think the Prime Minister is saying we have to start from a basis of relationship respect here. And we have to get this back on the rails. It's been strained. So how do we do that? If the U.S. administration, can drop the stuff on the 51st state, can drop the stuff on trying to tariff their most important partner and actually look at a North American economy, there's a lot of merit there. So we'll take that into consideration as we're also engaging with our counterparts.
Great stuff. We've been talking to the new Minister of Agriculture and Agri-Food, Mr. Kody Blois, out of Kings Hants, Nova Scotia. Minister Blois, thanks a lot for joining us. Look forward to our next chat indeed. Thanks so much.
Let's keep in touch. Thanks, Shaun.